G'day, welcome to Australia Ask. I'm Adam McArdle. We would like to acknowledge that we work, live and play in Darkinjung country. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Today we're here with Kaye Scott. G'day, Kaye.
G'day, thanks for having me.
Welcome. So some people may not know who you are yet, so what are you famous for? You're sitting here in the Australian outfit, so what's the famous bit?
I am an Australian female boxer that's been representing our country for over 10 years in the national team. I've had a bit of success. I've been to all the Commonwealth Games since females have been introduced with the sport of boxing, so right back in Glasgow in 2014. All the way through to Birmingham at the end of last year, and I managed to secure myself a silver medal there. And I've also recently come back from the World Championships only about a month ago now, and managed to secure myself a number 2 ranking in the world and grabbed another silver medal there.
So the second best boxer in the world.
Yeah, that's I like the sound of that.
That's pretty good. So let's start back at the beginning. So where were you born?
I was born in Barara, so Upper North Shore, and I've lived most of my life all along Hornsby, Barara way. I do have a strong link to the coast because I do my boxing training up here, and my mum's lived up here for about 10 years as well. So would that be Giracal country? Yes.
There you go. So you're born down there. Mum and dad, they both from down there?
Dad, yes, they're both Sydney, both from Sydney.
Yeah. What do mum and dad do?
Mummy's still working. She is 72 now.
Oh, wow.
But she's still working down at the Sand Hospital in Wahroonga. She travels down once a week and is an emergency care nurse there.
Okay.
Dad's retired. He does a little bit of consultancy work with a law firm, but he spent the majority of his life working with Coles Myer in different departments there. Okay,
very good. Brothers and sisters?
A lot of them. I'm from one of 6.
Wow.
So 5 girls and 1 boy.
Is that where the fighting came in? You were able to fight for your way through?
Trying to just assert my authority over my brother. No, it came later in the stage of my life, but middle child syndrome, I'd say.
Fair enough. So what do their siblings do? Any others in elite sport or anything like that?
No, I'm the only one there. Like, we all played sport growing up, but I'm probably the only one that's taken it to an elite level. I've got a big mixture. My brother works on Sydney ferries. My older sister is done a lot of work. She worked overseas on the super yachts. She's doing a lot of design now. My second oldest sister is working with a company being kind of like a personal assistant. Okay. And then my 2 younger ones are still kind of studying and just working part-time. Okay, very good. So talking about study, where did you go to school? Primary school? Primary school, Barara Public School girl. Did that all the way up until year 6, and then I went to Asquith Girls High. Okay. How did you find school? I didn't mind school. I think I was a pretty conscientious student. I did quite well academically, and I loved sport growing up as well. Okay. So both sides of things. And both the schools had good sporting programs to allow you to get? Yeah, it's pretty basic with the public school if you compare it with some of the opportunities some of the private schools get. But if you go well, there's still plenty of opportunities there that you can create for yourself. Okay. What was your favourite subject? Apart from sport. I was going to say PE, but I also really enjoyed biology as well. Yeah. I also did dance as a subject because all in high school, from when I was like 8 years old, I danced growing up as well, just doing a bit of jazz and ballet and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, never thought to go that way? Boxing was better than the professional dancer? The way my body kind of matured, I wasn't going to be a dancer. That was never going to be a ballerina, even though I think I would have liked to have been. No, yeah, I think that's a very tough sport to get into. I agree. They are some of the best sports people I've ever seen. Amazing. I've got a lot of admiration to them. Yeah.
So what was something which was really hard for you in that growing up?
I'd probably just say attention from my parents, like one of six, and that's probably part of the reason why I tried so hard at school and I was decent academically and with sports thing, because I would get some attention from my parents, because it was very difficult for six kids. We've all got different sports. We're being run around everywhere in different directions, soccer here, netball here. So that was probably challenging. And then also my parents divorced as well. So I'd say that was a pretty tough thing to go through, even though it was kind of later. It was start of university. So we had a big range. My older sisters were already out working. The younger ones were still in high school, and I was just starting uni. So I think any kind of change of that family system that you had, I probably took it the hardest than everyone else, because I just loved that family unit. It was a big change to adjust to.
So some people may not know what does change in that dynamic. So having to go to each parent's house, or the family dinners aren't the same. What does change?
I think it becomes different relationships between the two parents. Like my parents are very amicable with each other now. I'm very lucky in that regard. But while you're going through that process, I guess as a young adult, you find it hard of what you can talk to each parent and what you can say to this person, and then selling the family home, and my mum deciding to move up here, and dad stayed in Sydney. So a lot of changes on that front that I found difficult. And initially they actually moved away, so it meant university I didn't have the ability to stay at home as well. So I was kind of like straight out on my own in university, which made it quite challenging to work and try to study at the same time. But like any scenario, your challenges, you made it through, and you become resilient, and you learn to overcome that, and you're probably better off for it in the long run, even though it doesn't seem like it in that moment.
So we all have ups and downs, and we discuss it down. What's a real big up? What was one of the highlights of your childhood? One of the things you just go, oh, that was just so much.
It's a interesting question. Honestly, it would probably just be something so simple, like it'd be the weekends with the family, like a summer's day. We had a pool at home, and all of us outside, like playing with each other down at the pool. We used to have quite a big backyard, and Dad would always cook a barbecue every Sunday, and had this old cowbell on top of the back veranda that ring the cowbell when it was time to get out of the pool. And I also remember that time Gladiators was a TV show that was on then, and we all loved watching Gladiators after we had the barbecue, and that's probably a really fond, simple memory of us all just being happy together, and I loved playing in the pool, and it's just really happy memories.
So was he any good at a barbecue?
He's really good now, but he used to always burn everything. But then he'd blame us, it's because we never got out of the pool in time. But he's pretty good now.
As a father, I can blame the kid for everything. It's easy. All right. So after high school, what did you do? You went to uni. So what did you do at uni?
Yeah, I did relatively well in high school. I remember it was back in the UAI times. I really was thinking about potentially doing medicine, and I didn't get enough of a high UAI to be able to do that. So kind of a bridging course to choose was medical science, and I squeezed enough of a mark to just slip into that. So I think it was 91, and I got exactly 91. So I enrolled in that at Macquarie University. But I think probably with some of the subjects, organic chemistry, and some of my mathematics ability from high school, it really was above my ability to be able to do. It was kind of assumed 4-unit mathematics, and I just did really well in general mathematics.
Okay.
So I found it a big struggle. I pushed through and got through the first year, and under my dad's encouragement, he was like, it'll be easier the second year. It wasn't easier. So I decided that I'd change courses 1.5 years into it, and luckily a lot of my subjects counted for credit, and I decided I'd enrol in a sports science degree over at UTS, and I also stayed on to do a 4th year dip ed as well, so I'd be a qualified high school teacher as well.
Oh, very good. So how did you get into boxing? Did you do it as a youth, or how did you get into the boxing?
It's a bit of an odd one to get into, and I really kind of just stumbled into it. I did a lot of kind of mostly netball and dance in high school, but I kind of had enough. I'd been playing it since I was 7, 8 years old, and university I still loved sport, so I was going to the gym a lot, and one of the kind of group exercise classes was, as a lot of gyms still have now, like your boxercise and box fit type class.
Yeah.
And the instructor of that class was also a boxing coach. So he used to do just the fitness boxing for anyone that pops in. But afterwards he took some boys that were fighters and trained them afterwards. And he kind of hassled me a little bit and go, oh, like you throw a punch pretty well and you're really fit. Like I'd love you to hang back and I can teach you some stuff with the boys. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And I used to do the class with my best friend, and one time after him just hassling for kind of 4 or 5 months, I was like, okay, I'll try it once. So I dragged her along with me as well, and I left that class saying that was amazing. I really, really love it. I'm intrigued by it. It was so much fun. And she left that class going, I'm never doing that again. So I had to do a little bit of kind of tag touch where you're just punching each other on the shoulders, and she was like, nah, not for me. And I was like, I like this.
Yeah.
And honestly, it just evolved from there. I decided I'd join up at my local PCYC club, and it's just slow and steady. I was the only girl that came along to the class and wasn't really given too much attention. I just rocked up and the bags were there, and I just tried to hit the bag, and eventually I'd been coming for a few months and they're like, oh, she's not going away.
Yeah.
Better go over and just give her a little bit of information, and it just rolled on from there.
So we're here today at Complete Boxing. How did you end up here? What was the pathway to get to here?
I had a bit of a journey along this kind of 12 years, I think, competing now. It might be 12 or 13 years. So my first kind of club that I worked in was Hornsby PCYC there. I was with my coach Danny for maybe about 6 years. Then I moved and travelled up here with another Central Coast coach who a lot of people actually know because he was a fighter and went to the Olympics, Jamie Pittman. Okay. And I was training with him up on the Central Coast here, but he's now employed with Boxing Australia and moved to Canberra. And I've known Joel throughout my entire career because he's heavily involved with PCYC and Boxing New South Wales. And I'd done a bit of work with the PCYC and been to a few of his camps. I loved his style of boxing. So it was kind of my natural progression. When Jamie left, I asked him whether he'd have me in the gym and I'd love him to be my coach. And I haven't looked back from there. It's probably like 4 or 5 years ago now. And he's amazing, and I love the gym here.
And I'm definitely sure you're not the only female in here either.
Oh, I'm definitely not.
Yeah, he has a lot of good athletes in here.
Yeah, very good.
So you spoke about Boxing Australia. So as a member of Boxing Australia, what is the pathway to grow up through the ranks and things? So a lot of people probably don't know where you start and the process to work your way up through Boxing Australia.
So initially it is just kind of at club level, like most sports, you join a club that's probably close to where you live, or someone that's a good coach within good travelling distance, and you start at club level there. You want to kind of master the basics. When you're coach and you feel like you're ready to be able to step in and have a fight, then you can start having some fights. New South Wales, all different states have different rules. So New South Wales, we've actually got the highest age limit, so you can't actually start boxing competitively until you're 14 years old.
Okay.
So I think might even be 10 years old over up in Queensland, and even in the ACT it might be 10 years old as well. We're kind of a little bit slow catching up with things because 14 is quite late to be getting into things with some sports now.
Yeah.
So you can always travel interstate and fight that way. Then when you're good enough, you start getting enough fights, club level then moves into state level. Each year there's kind of state trials, and if you can kind of become number 1 or number 2 at your state, you'll be given further opportunities for fights and moving on then through to national level.
Yeah.
Nationals are usually happen once a year, and the top 1 or 2 people from each state all come together for a big major competition. And if you can become the Australian champion, the best of all the states, then you get international competition and opportunities to travel overseas and compete on the world stage.
Okay. So how many, so is it like the top 2 from each weight division get to go, or the top 1, or?
It's only number 1.
You've got to be the number 1.
Yeah, sometimes now it's a lot to do with limited funding. There are some opportunities now with like fund your own way and things with top 2 people or someone that's shown potential. But even if you might not get that number 1 position, there's now pathways within the Australian Institute of Sport that you might be brought into a squad program for more development, and you'll come into training camps where you get some more development, which can help build your skills and again lead to more opportunities, and maybe just some smaller international fights like heading over to New Zealand and getting some exposure there before we kind of travel over to Europe and stuff like that.
Is there anything you think that could maybe be done a little bit better in that process?
It's something that's actually Boxing Australia doing a really good job of now, which it wasn't around when I first started. It's, I think, developing from the grassroots and the younger levels, because you need to get that really strong to then allow it to keep fostering down the line. And we do now have a lot of youth and junior programs where they meet regularly and they get exposure to, we've got now Jamie Pittman, who I said is now in charge of those youth and juniors, and he travels interstate with seminars to help build the skills of those athletes, and there's plenty of opportunities if they show skill and heart there of getting international fights or more state-to-state fights there.
So would Jamie sort of be looking for the talent and then maybe suggest a different gym, or how important is your gym and your coach to the whole process?
Everything comes down to club level, because if you don't master those basics, you're not going to be notified in those talent ID programs, because each state body has people that kind of notice people and mark them to get kind of like, I guess, earmarked for when Jamie visits the states to go, oh, have a little look at them on this fight show, and then he'll go, yep, I think that person shows potential, and then they'll be invited to come through. So a lot of it does come down to club level. He can also discuss with them whether he thinks they need to change clubs. But yeah, biggest thing is getting those fundamentals right and having a good coach at club level. Okay.
We've been speaking about Boxing Australia, which is amateur boxing. What are the big differences between, say, amateur boxing and professional boxing? What are the options there?
It's actually quite a vast difference. There's tactically different, stylistic differently, timing differently. So amateurs in the elites, both men and females, will fight 3 3-minute rounds. And we fight in international levels consecutive days. So something like the World Championships, it was 5 fights to get through to the gold medal rounds. Okay. Whereas the professionals, women fight 2-minute rounds, males still fight 3-minute rounds. For the championship belts, women will fight 10 2-minute rounds. So it's kind of like saying comparing a marathon to a sprint. Yeah. And the men fight 12 3-minute rounds. So you can imagine the style of training is quite different, having that endurance capacity, and then the way that you fight, your style of shots, and the scoring systems is even quite different there as well. So even though it's boxing, there's lots of differences. You can't suddenly just go be a top level amateur and swing straight into the pros and go, okay, you're going to be a top level pro. They often take easier fights at the beginning to help wean them into, okay, you got to learn to sit on your shots a little bit longer. It's a little bit harder heavier with your shots. You do get a lot more knockouts coming through because of those extended rounds that they fight, and that both no headgear in the pros as well. That's a big difference between the amateurs as well.
I believe that you've got a place in history as the first female boxer in New South Wales to actually fight an exhibition fight. So how did that come about?
That is. So referring back to my journey when I first got introduced to the boxing, I'd signed up to Hornsby PCYC, was going regularly, like 3 or 4 times a week, and some of the boys were fighting on the weekends and I wanted to support and join in, so I'd go and watch some of their fights. And Danny, the head coach down there, I was sitting there watching one of the boys and I was like, oh, do you think maybe that I'd be able to have a fight, like if I keep training hard for another year or something? And his response was no. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? What do you mean no? He's like, you can't box in New South Wales. And honestly, my jaw dropped down to the floor. I was like, what do you mean? He said, it's illegal for girls in New South Wales to box. And I was like, so 2008 or something like that. And I was like, I just don't understand. It just confused me so much. But we, again, New South Wales has some different laws to some of the other states, and it was kind of one of those archaic type laws that still existed. I still get training. I was really kind of mostly focused on my study at that stage, but later down the track, the 2012 Olympics introduced females for the first time, because it had only ever had males competing in that sport. And when that was announced that females were going to be introduced, the New South Wales government lifted that law, so it would kind of be equal opportunity for all Australians, all the states to be able to. And as soon as that law was lifted, I was like, Danny, can I have a fight? And he's like, okay, let's start training for a fight. And it's pretty nerve-wracking. So you can imagine your first fight anyway, you're absolutely scared. And I had a Channel 7 film crew out there in the back when I've got no idea what's going at me. And yeah, pretty proud that I was kind of the first in New South Wales, and it's such a big change if you kind of look at it now. We've got so many young upcoming girls, and yeah, it's really exciting to be part of that change.
Oh, you opened it all up for everyone. What's it like being a female boxer on the international stage? So you've spoken a lot about the club level and things, which a lot of girls probably already know, but when they're striving for that end goal, what's it like to be a female boxer on the international stage? What's it take?
It's a lot of hard work, but I think that's the case in any elite sport or any career. If you want to be at that top level, it's going to take a lot of hard work, discipline, dedication. I think we're in a really great place right now. I think women in sport are really earning the respect of the general public, of coaches, and it's a really positive change to see of when I first started back in the boxing game. Also think combat sports is being accepted by the public a little bit more as well. Yeah. Probably just the readiness of things like the UFC, and people just see it a little bit more. So it's more accepted, whereas kind of when I was first starting off, my parents were kind of a little bit anti it, a bit standoffish, and Dad thought it was just going to be a little bit of a phase that I went through, and concerned for me. Whereas now our sport is kind of performance driven with Boxing Australia, and the funding is when you perform well. And the last kind of 2 Olympic cycles, the females have really been performing well. So we've had a lot of support from Boxing Australia in regards to opportunities to travel overseas and to develop as athletes, because unfortunately with Australia being so far away from the rest of the world, if you're already number one in the country, it's kind of hard to get that top quality female sparring. It's great working with the boys, but if we want to get other competition, and it's just a little bit different with the boys, we need to be exposed to those other high level, and that means kind of going overseas to Europe or to America or to UK, and with those performance results, we're getting the opportunity to do that. So it is really exciting.
So how often do you get to go over to international things? Is it just like the world champs and the Olympics, or are there more?
That's again been a big change. When I first started, even though I was number one in Australia, for me to go over to the World Championships, there was no funding. I was selling, remember those Cadbury boxes of chocolates?
Of chocolates, yeah.
I used to get my clients at the gym, everyone to go out and sell the Cadbury chocolates. Even though I already got the spot, you had to pay your own way to go over to these trips. Whereas now, you got the number one spot, you're paid, well, they pay for your flights for you to head overseas and represent your country. So that's a fantastic change. And we are also seeing now, particularly if you've now got a world ranking, which I have the last kind of 4 or 5 years, I've kind of been in the top 8 with the world, that we get further opportunities and a lot more skill development to be able to head overseas for training camps. So we need to be able to do that to be able to stay on top, and it's kind of,
So it sounds like we've progressed a long way. Is there anything else we need to keep doing to get us that next step, next stage?
Boxing as a sport needs more funding from the government. I know different sports get allocated different amounts of money, and the biggest thing is if you don't have the money there to be able to send them, you don't get that exposure. More of these programs that are coming out, although as I said, those youth and junior programs are starting to really roll out and develop now, and I think we're yet to see the results. It takes a bit of time to come through. And also just the involvement of more kids. The bigger density you have within the sport is the more great athletes you're going to come from it, rather than a small pool. And I think even just that public acceptance, and little girls can go, like, hey mum, I want to box. Yeah. Rather than, like, you'd think 10 years ago, no little girl's going to go, can I box, mum? It's can I dance? So I think that's going to really help build a really positive future for boxing and for other combat sports.
Okay. So we might move off boxing for a little bit. We've done a lot of boxing so far, and a contemporary topic at the moment is the Voice to Parliament.
Yes.
So there's lots of discussions on it. We'd love to hear your opinion. What's your opinion on the Voice to Parliament?
I think overall it's a really great idea. We, as a country, firstly, it's a great recognition of the First Nations people and how important it is for them to be consulted on potential legislation that's going to affect them. I think that we should refer back to them and say, and ask their opinion on it. Is this policy going to be beneficial? What are the disadvantages? What are the advantages? So I think that's a really fantastic idea. My only slight concern is whether it's one of those things that the government does to tick a box. I know that they don't have a veto power in it, so essentially you could consult them and ask them, and they could go, I don't think that's going to be very good, and then we could just go, we want that policy to go through. So I hope that it's not one of those situations where we've got this set up and we consult with them, but then their voice isn't listened to. Yeah. But they, on paper it looks great, and go, we've got this and blah, blah, blah. So that's probably my only concern, that their voice isn't listened to. But otherwise, I do think it's a good step in the right direction.
And every step in that direction is is a good thing.
Sure
It may
is.
not be perfect the first time, but let's keep moving forward.
Definitely.
So, what's a typical day look like for an elite athlete like yourself? What start to finish,
Okay.
what are we looking at?
So there's probably two different phases. Again, boxing as a sport, we do get limited funding. So in a lot of other countries, if you're the best in the country, your full-time job is just being an athlete, and we have a centralised program where you kind of say would live at the Australian Institute of Sport and your job is just being an athlete. That's not the way we work in Australia. It's also quite difficult because we're such a big country to be able to do that. You don't just travel an hour here and we can all meet and then you go back home. It would mean everyone moving from their states and having to live somewhere. So when I'm in a generalised training camp, I still work full-time and I train full-time. So at the moment I do personal training and some group fitness classes as well. It's what's worked best for me the last 10 years because I do have to disappear for kind of 4 to 6 weeks at a time travelling overseas. I've got really supportive long-term clients, that understand that. So I usually juggle mostly 2 sessions a day. Sometimes I'll do a third one if I can squeeze it in, and then training my clients as well. So it's a lot of travel as well because I'm part of it. I'm a New South Wales Institute of Sport scholarship holder, so it means I travel from Sydney out to Homebush and then I travel every day from Sydney up to the Central Coast to train here with Joel. And then I work kind of between 4 and 6 hours a day as well.
So
busy.
Very busy. So obviously having to manage the money and all that sort of stuff is a big part of it, and the exercise. How about the food and the eating and the nutrition? Because you see a lot nowadays about nutrition on TV, protein shakes, etc. So how important is the nutrition in the whole process?
Nutrition is huge in boxing because we're a weight-based sport. I think because I've been in it so long, I naturally encompass a pretty healthy diet. It's kind of just my norm of what I fall into. And then when you do start a training camp, knowing that you've got a fight in 8 weeks' time, things do become a lot more strict. However, I'm actually in the process now of, I have been fighting as a light middleweight boxer, so it's either 69 or 70 kilos for the past kind of 5 years, since before 2018 Commonwealth Games. But the Olympics has limited weight divisions for both men and female. They don't have a full spectrum of the 12 weight divisions. And my light middleweight was in the last Olympics. However, in Paris 2024, they've just rearranged all the weight divisions that they've selected, and mine isn't there anymore. So it does mean I am going to be making my debut at welterweight, which is dropping down to 66 kilos. So it's another 4 kilos down on what I'm already at. Yeah. So I'm very lucky to have the scholarship at New South Wales Institute of Sport. So I've got some professionals to help me make that weight change, because I need to do it the right way. A, so I'm going to perform, and B, so it's healthy on my body as well. I'm already a pretty lean person as it is, so I do need those professionals to make sure it's done in the right way. And there'll be a lot less treats happening in my diet. Probably going to become a little bit of a grumpy person over the next few months. But when you got a goal, eyes on the prize, and you do what you got to do.
You've spoken about the sports science on your weight and things. I'm assuming that as a female athlete, there's a lot of sports science now on maybe the menstrual cycle and the training around that too. How do women manage all that in their training?
It's actually becoming a little bit of a popular topic at the moment, not just for elite athletes, but just for the general public and just general fitness enthusiasts, of understanding the menstrual cycle and how it affects training and mood and all that kind of stuff. There needs to be a lot more research done on the topics. However, I do know a little bit. I don't want to be quoting, I'm not a scientist or anything like that, but there's different phases of your cycle that affects training and what kind of you should be choosing to train. So generally you have the menstrual cycle itself, and women are usually much more fatigued and tired in that stage. And if you have a choice of what training you do more kind of restorative type training or your lighter style training in that. The second stage after that is the follicular stage. So that kind of goes for about 14 days, and your estrogen levels of your hormones just steadily increase with that. And as that increases, it means we're much more primed for higher intensity type exercise. So HIIT style work or high intensity intervals is when you're going to do your best there. Then you have your ovulation phase. That's when often strength benefits, if you're going to do like PBs and lifting heavy in the gym, that's kind of when that would happen in that phase. We're highest with our estrogen levels there and highest with your testosterone levels as well. Then we have the luteal phase where all those hormones start to drop down again. And I think that, again, that starts to move more into the lower intensity exercise as we get closer again to start the cycle coming through. I guess understanding that and understanding feelings and hunger and that you can get bloating and weight retention, which makes a big difference in, again, weight-based sports, and having a little bit of an understanding of it and coaches to be understanding of as well. Mm-hmm. But there needs to still be a lot more research done on the topic, and I do believe contraceptive uses like the pill and implants then affect things even further, and they make changes on that. So it's a topic that needs to be researched more. And it has a big effect. It was actually only about 12 months ago, there was a professional fight over in the UK. It was for a world title as well. And one of the girls, Shannon Courtney, missed weight, and her excuse was that I was on my period and that I wasn't able to lose the weight. And that does affect things, but you need to know, as an elite athlete, you need to know where you are in your cycle, and if that's going to cause a little bit of fluid retention, you need to plan that in advance. So it is a big thing that women need to take into consideration, whether it's making weight, whether it's choosing when you need to recover or do a lighter session. It's quite an interesting topic.
And Australia is famous for our sports science. A lot of our sport is based on sports science, so it's definitely something we should be leading the world.
Definitely.
Yeah. So one other thing which I've heard is that there is an age limit coming up for you. Well, what is it and why?
Something that I'm quite passionate about, because I only really took notice of it when it was kind of brought to my attention that the World Championships that I competed at this year would be my last ever World Championships. And that is because IBA, which is the international governing body, has a age restriction of that after 40 years old that you cannot compete any longer in elite amateur boxing, male or female. And I question that, and I don't believe that it is current with today's improvements in medical research, in training protocols, in recovery protocols. And I don't understand either why professional boxers do not have that limitation in place. So they're telling me that I can't fight anymore in the amateurs, but I can go pro, take a headgear off and fight 10 rounds, and that's okay, which doesn't make sense to me. So it's something that I've kind of been pushing on, and I feel like it's maybe one of those rules of, like, women weren't allowed to box in New South Wales, that it's just one of those rules that was in place, and that it's something that they need to address and have a look at and go, you know what, we need to adjust this. So I'm trying to bring a little bit more awareness to IBA and also to the general public to kind of go, hang on, you know what, I don't agree with this.
So the question some people may ask is it just because you're unique that you're able to do it at 40, or are there other people which you know who are still really skilled boxers at 40, which could continue to compete but just aren't allowed to?
Well, I've actually had a reach out from quite a few different people internationally that have come and said to me that they've stopped getting involved with the sport because they picked it up at 37 and they kind of said, oh, what's the point if I'm going to take me a year or two and then I'm not going to be able to box or pursue anything further? And they're like, I really like you to push on that because it affects me and it changes whether I would have continued in the sport. There are a lot of other women that are performing well, and I think I do notice the quality of women in particular still seem to be able to perform quite well. And I know in the professional stage, there was a girl only last year, she was 42 or 41 years old that just won a world title. Nina Hughes at 41 years old. There was plenty of other girls that I know in national teams that are 38, 39. And probably the biggest one that draws to my attention was that at the last Olympic Games, there was a boxer from Finland, Mira Potkinen, and she qualified for the Olympics. And obviously with COVID, the Olympics was changed. It was delayed a year, and that actually meant that she was technically, under the rules, she was not able to compete. IBA lifted that rule and allowed her to box in the Olympics. And she medalled.
Well, so she's clearly able to.
She's clearly able to perform. She was up there. Yeah. And they say that the Olympics should be the best of the best. And that's not the case if they're stopping athletes. And I've just come back with a silver medal and they're saying that I can't defend my place.
Yeah.
So I'm happy if they think that it is a little bit compromising with our health, whether you have to get a brain scan or something after 40 each year. I'd definitely be on board with that. But I do think it's something that they need to re-examine.
So it sounds like you and others are physically able to. You're obviously a very smart woman if you went to university for medical science. So you should be able to make your own mind up.
Yeah.
Should you not?
Yeah.
Yeah?
That's exactly it. And you can in the professional scene, so I don't really see the difference.
Yeah.
And I'm looking to make that change.
So how do the people help with that? What's the thing they can do to help you?
I'm in the process of doing some contacting IBA directly and working with the board to try to have them examine this. But I've just started up an online petition as well to try to show some public support in this. So I've got that on my socials, my Instagram socials, it's in my bio there, and also my Facebook, Kaye Scott Boxer. Yep. As well. So if anyone is keen to support in that way and to provide an electronic signature, that would be really helpful as well.
So everyone, reach out, hop on Kaye's socials. It's just a simple click. Help them all out, all right? These athletes have worked their whole lives. They're smart. They should be able to make their own decisions. So reach out on their socials, hop on, do the petition for them. All right, so we've spoken a bit about your past, Boxing Australia, and some topical points, but this is called Australia Asks, right? And that's because Australia write in questions. So on our socials, we put up who we're going to be interviewing, and they write in questions for us. So we've got some questions from the public.
What have they drummed up?
So Leo has asked, have you got any plans to go into MMA?
I do get asked that quite regularly. It's something that I explored maybe like 6 years ago. I started, actually joined jiu-jitsu and started doing that a couple of times a week. But I decided that I wanted to just focus on the boxing, and that's really where 100% my focus and dedication is, and I'm not interested at all anymore now. I've got my Olympic dream, and that's what I want to achieve.
So Leanne asked, what is your favourite travel destination when you're travelling around the world?
As a holiday destination, I have a bit of an attachment to Hawaii. It's kind of something that my mum and I have done together as like a mother-daughter trip to spend time with each other. We often go kind of just before Christmas time. We've done a few of the different islands, and we actually already have our trip booked at the end of this year. So I love my mum a lot, and I love spending time with her. It's so funny because some of my friends were like, why would you go on a holiday with your mum? And I was like, I love it. We love spending time with each other. So Hawaii is probably my favourite destination, and I love the water and the beach and warmth. So I love that.
When you're getting to travel for leisure, still exercising, still working at all, or a little bit let off?
No, it's definitely not 2 or 3 times a day, but I love exercising, and it makes me happy. So I would still probably do something each day. I love doing more of the things out in nature. There's like a cocoa crater trails, or I'll hire a bike and go out somewhere, but I'm very much a very adventure and active type person.
So I'm going to guess you've been to the top of all the volcanoes.
Yes.
Fair enough. Jack's asked, what's the most important part of flight prep?
Don't think you can isolate just one thing. They all come together as a unit, and if you're lacking in one area, then it falls apart. But something that I've probably paid a lot more attention to that I didn't do in my younger years is the mental aspect of things. Okay. I actually work with a mindset coach now, and I have for the past 3 years, a beautiful lady called Claudine, and she's really kind of built some tools in my head. It's like it's really hard to explain, but it's the way I talk to myself. It's building that trust and belief in myself as an athlete, and just doing work on that side. It's not just the physical side. I'll listen to podcasts and do little drills in my head and using imagery and imagination and visualization well before the fight comes. Like in Paris, like I've already seen that I'm there on the Australian team. It's kind of like the future is already written. I already know that I'm going to be on the team. And I would say, even though I believed it leading into Tokyo, I didn't believe it with that same deep-seated belief that I do now. Yeah. I just feel like it's written in my destiny, and that that's the last 12 years of my life, and that's what's meant to be. So I think spending time and dedicating on that mental side and mental preparation has been kind of that game changer, that extra 1%. And at the elite level, that's what it is. It's just that tiny bit that makes you that little bit better.
Gets you over the line.
Yeah, that's it.
So Harry asked, the metaphor is when you get knocked down again, getting back up again. All right? It's something which defines your personality. What is it like when you're knocked down? What do you have to go through to try and make yourself get back up off that floor?
People probably think that it's really hard, but I think that competitive nature, I don't have to second guess or think about it. Even when I'm hurting and I'm hitting that kind of 10 out of 10, I don't have any more to give. You just find another gear and you work, because I know that I believe that I've got so much potential in myself, and that I've got all this great support system around me with my coach, my gym, my family, my friends. It's like I'm doing it for everyone, so I want to give everything that I can. So if I get knocked down or I'm given an 8 count or anything like that, again, it's that mental preparation. It's like, okay, that's happened, refocus, let's go, start again, yeah. Fresh. There's always the opportunity to still win things, even when you've lost the first round, you've lost the second round, you can always turn things around.
Bad at the Game 07 asked, do you have any pre-fight rituals?
I'm not someone that follows that. I don't have, like, you've got to put the right glove on first, or you need to eat this first. And the biggest reason why I do that is when we travel internationally, a lot of the time we don't have control of some of the external circumstances that we're provided with. So I feel like my headspace would be ruined if I say that I want to have banana pancakes and a coffee every morning before fight day, because we might not have transport and we might not have access to be able to have that. So
it's too much of a risk.
It's too much of a risk, and it will kind of put that mindset in the wrong space. So I'm happy to just kind of go with the flow. I do have kind of set similar routines that I follow with a warm-up, but it doesn't have to be done exactly to a T, and that's because the conditions often are changed. Sometimes we might be given a warm-up space that's you're squashed and you don't have room to be running around where you normally do things, and other times you've got a perfect scenario where you've got heaps of space, it's warm, it's you've got to be able to adapt. So I like to have a little bit of flexibility there so it doesn't ruin that mindset.
Fair enough. So Mau's asked, within the amateur boxing community, what's the feeling of celebrity boxers like Paul Gallen coming in, getting paid big money for their fights and whatnot? Is it a plus or a minus seen in the boxing community?
There's a bit of controversy on that one. A lot of the boxing community are against it, and a lot of the community are towards it. I think in Australia we've made a really big connection between football and boxing, and Paul Gallen is probably the most well-known footballer that's been paid a lot of money, and people get annoyed that other stars have not been given that opportunity. However, I really support it, and Paul Gallen left football a long time ago, and I would call him a boxer. He's trained as a professional boxer for over 8 years with someone, and he's not just a run-in that's tried to make a bit of money. He's supported other professionals and allowed them to come onto a platform where the footy crowd has been amalgamated with the boxing crowd, so it's more eyes on the sport, being given TV time for other boxers that are on the card to get exposure. So to be honest, I really think the positives have outweighed the negatives with it, so I'm all for it.
Excellent. Let's go into the big vision, okay, and have a look at the future. How do you see Brower and the Central Coast going forward? Do you see them really, because they're on the train lines, really building up, or staying their little village and moving forward?
I think you can probably already see the change that's happening on the Central Coast. The population density is increasing, and I think if I forecast 20 years in the future, that it's kind of going to become like a little bit of a mini Sydney hub. So I can see, I guess, more schools, more facilities being provided by the government, hopefully, and hopefully it will still keep its charm and have that kind of local connection with the community, but I think it might just be on a grander scale.
So what are the biggest challenges you see for the next 20 years for us locally and within Australia?
I probably think is managing our planet and the climate. We have limited resources on this planet, and we're going to need to come together to looking after the environment.
We've spoken about Gosford and Brower and the Central Coast and the challenges. So what's for you? What do you see your future being?
I think that's a difficult question for most people to answer, particularly in my scenario, being an elite athlete, and that my focus is so much on putting everything I can right now into the Olympics, and it requires so much energy. But I can't be silly. I still need to look into the future and what that means after elite sport, because we all know that you do have a limited time frame in that. I have explored the potential idea of becoming a firefighter. That's always, again, it agrees with my active lifestyle. I've also would love to keep a link with boxing, and thought about potentially working in the media, whether that's commentary within boxing or some idea on that front.
Have you ever thought of going back to being a teacher? You trained as a teacher. Would you ever go back to be a teacher?
I actually don't think so. I steered away from it initially because I didn't really enjoy the pracs that we did. We'd kind of like where you are a teacher for 6 or 8 weeks at a time, and I felt like I was just disciplining the kids the majority of the time rather than actually teaching them. Yeah. So that really kind of steered me away from pursuing that any further.
But it's probably a really important thing. The new New South Wales government's talking about trying to get more teachers in, and they're struggling to get the youth to go into it. It's probably a really good thing. They don't want to be a parent. They want to be a teacher. They want to teach. That's
it. I think by doing the personal training and the group fitness, I've kind of still doing that teaching role, but I'm with an audience that want to be there. And I think teaching these days is a very, very difficult job. And the government need to look at some kind of incentive to making it more encouraging for other young adults to want to study and to teach our next generation. We need people there to be able to fill those roles.
Yeah. So the media stuff, yeah. Lots of sportsmen and women want to go into the media stuff, but you've spoken so elegantly here today.
Oh,
I think
thank you.
Definitely something in your wheelhouse, yeah.
If you're watching.
The last question is the biggest of the vision. Where do you see Australia in 50 years? We've been around for 65,000 years now. Constant people here, oldest culture on Earth. Where do you see Australia being in the next 50 years?
I'd love us to be in a position where we've still got that diversity, lots of different cultures coming together, and that we're living peacefully in a planet that we're looking after. And I really think that's going to become dependent on individuals taking a little bit more responsibility with their behaviours, and also the government setting up situations to help manage climate change. Hope we're a prosperous, happy and peaceful nation.
It would be absolutely amazing if we got there. So thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. We wish you all the best in your fights coming up. But if you ever want to come back on and give that media a bit of a whirl, we'd love to have you. So
might take you up on that. Thank you.